Ahoy there, Captain Benzie here, coming at you with another ship fitting guide for Eve Echoes. And no, your eyes do not deceive you, we are finally going to be taking a look at the MOA Guardian. Yeah, this video has kind of almost achieved meme status on this channel. I think alongside the Balgorn and the Nightmare, it's one of those ships that people just thought I was never going to get round to covering. Well, who's laughing now? We're finally having a look at it. Now, the Balgorn and the Nightmare as well, I am still working on those videos. The Balgorn is difficult because it's a PvP ship, and I obviously can't fly it on live. I need to be on Fulmination, and yes, of course, I am here on Fulmination now. That's why I'm in Jita with only one person in local. Now, ultimately, the Nightmare video is one I'm working on. I just need to sit down and actually record it as well. But the Balgorn is going to take time. I am trying to figure that one out and sort of get a good video angle on it, but it will be there eventually. Anyway, enough about the videos that are coming. Today's video, the MOA Guardian at long last. We're going to be looking at what this ship actually is, asking the questions like, what role does it fulfill? What can you do with it in a fleet? Can you fly this solo? And then we're going to have a look at the Moa II Guardian and give the two a side-by-side comparison. Once you can fly the Moa II Guardian, is there any reason to come back and fly the lower rank one, or is the Moa II Guardian just a direct upgrade? We're going to be asking this and more questions as we go through. Today is also going to be our Combo Omega giveaway for this week, so two of you will be able to win a month of Combo Omega, which, woo, courtesy of NetEase and the Content Creator Program. Thanks guys, it's always nice to be able to help some folks out and give you free Combo Omega. Anyway, stay tuned to the video, we will talk about that later on. I'll give instructions, tell you what you need to do to enter, and how that's all gonna work. So, that all said and done then, if you do enjoy this video, let me know by hitting like on it, sub to the channel for all things Eve Echoes, ding the notification bell to never miss an upload, and let me know in the comment section down below what ships and what topics you want me to cover in future videos, and as you can see, I will get round to them eventually. Now, if you do want to be extra awesome and help support this channel, you can do so either by checking out our merchandise store on Redbubble or by coming and joining us on Patreon. Now, I've seen that there's been a few of you who have grabbed some stuff off the Redbubble merch store. That's really, really cool. It's really humbling to think that there's some guy in Canada or the USA or France, Belgium, and a couple of the other places where these have been sold, walking around wearing the Catskull Academy or the Silent Rose and things like that. If you have grabbed some merch, when it arrives, let me know what you think of the quality, and please send me some photos. It's such a cool concept for me. It's really humbling to know that there's folks out there who are representing my brand across the world. I'm just a little kid here, basically, in a man's body, living in Zimbabwe, talking about a game that I absolutely adore, and apparently some of you like to listen to that. I'm a very lucky guy for that, so thank you all so much. Anyway, that all said and done then, let's jump right in to talking about the Caldari MOA Guardian. The MOA hull is the Caldari State's Heavy Cruiser line, so it's kind of analogous to the Minmatar Rupture, the Amar Mala, and the Galente Thorax, and you get your first feel of these at Tech Level 6 with the MOA Trainer and the MOA itself. Interestingly enough, the MOA is probably one of the most popular Tech 6 cruisers, and the MOA Trainer is probably one of the least flown ships in the entire game. Basically, for some reason, the trainers are seeded on the market, and they're more expensive than most people would pay for a standard MOA, and the standard MOA, spoiler alert, is just a direct upgrade over the MOA Trainer. As such, why would anyone ever fly the Trainer? Now, of course, if you enjoyed the MOA, and I have covered it elsewhere on this channel a long time ago, then of course upgrading into the MOA Guardian does seem like a no-brainer, but it does require a bit more thought than perhaps you might first think. That said though, looking at it is almost reason enough to upgrade on its own, just though the shape of it reminds me of Serenity, the main ship from the Firefly series, and I just love the colour scheme on this thing. That's black, the slate grey, the grey detailing, the sort of red lines and that on it. It is just a badass looking ship, and the skins are pretty awesome too. The Earth skin gives it this sort of tribal Mayan or Incan feeling, probably like even Aztec, with sort of that rusty red and the blacks and the gold detailing, sort of these tribalistic designs, which is really cool, and even the golden slumber design. I'm not a big fan of the orange, the sort of olive green detailing, but that sort of somber gold and the black is a really handsome ship, and again, it just looks awesome. That one was given away for Thanksgiving. There's a lot of them around, so if you do like the look of that one, you can probably buy it on the market fairly cheap. Though now that I've said that, the Benzie effect is going to come into place, and people are going to ramp up the price of their golden slumber skins. Anyway, let's look at the attributes and fittings of this. Now, being one of the heavy cruisers basically means that we are using less in the high slots and more in the low slots. If you want to use a much more aggressive attack cruiser, for the Caldari, that is obviously the it's the Caracal line. They have more high slots and fewer low slots. The Moa line has fewer high slots, more low slots, and then the name Guardian obviously comes onto this ship to give us the idea that this is definitely a ship that is all about its defences. No one calls you a Guardian if you're the guy that rushes headfirst into everything and beats them up at ridiculous pace. You are a Guardian if you're the guy who stands there stoically with heavy armour and a shield and defends everyone around you, and that's very much what we're going to be doing here. Now, we've got a single solitary drone tube that can launch small or medium drones. That is, of course, supplemental damage. If anything gets within drone range, you get to apply a little bit of extra damage against it. Useful against things like frigates or destroyers that otherwise may happen to get under your guns and be orbiting a little bit too fast. We have 3 high slots. Now, 3 high slots is never going to be heavy on the damage. As I said, we're a Guardian here. Even no matter what our bonuses really are here, 3 high slots is just never going to be high on the damage scale. 2 mid slots as well is probably less than I would like to see on a ship like this. Especially being a Guardian means one of those mid slots is almost always going to be taken up by one specific module, meaning that you really only have 1 mid slot here that you can actually play around with, which isn't really much. You know, you kind of have to very much decide, do you want a Nosferatu, do you want a Web, do you want Scrams, what do you want to do with this ship? You have 1 mid slot, enjoy. The 5 low slots, however, exemplify what the Guardian is all about. Obviously, your tanking modules are all going to be low slots, and, well, we've got 5 of them. We have 5 low slots that we can fit with various different tanking modules, and maybe put a bit of propulsion or weapon upgrade on there if we really feel like it. We then have 3 combat rigs, still saying power grid! 3 combat rigs and 3 engineering rigs, with which to add a little bit of versatility to your playstyle on this ship, or to boost up its capabilities that little bit more. The defense, as I said, we're looking at a Guardian here, 14,102 defense out of the gate. That is without any skills or anything touching this ship. That is monstrous. That is also, I think, the biggest shield on any cruiser up to this point in the game at 5,076. That is a humongous shield. The armour and structure aren't terrible either. 3,500, of course, it's a Caldari ship, so it doesn't get much in the way of armour or structure at all, but the shield, I mean, the armour and structure aren't terrible, so if your shield tank does fail momentarily, you've got a lot to still get through, but that shield is just huge, and as you'll see later, we make it absolutely massive. Now, we've got a power grid, 658 megawatts. That's fairly sizable. It's good enough for what we need, plus we can actually play around and cram in some heavier stuff there with the right skills, and indeed possibly even with ancillary power grid rigs, but we'll talk about that more later. Capacitor bank is pretty solid too, 2464, 2464 is the number I was trying to say there. 2464 gigajoules of capacitor is not bad at all, but you'd kind of expect that. This is a Caldari ship. Caldari ships tend to have very high capacitor because they're going to be dealing with shield tanking modules and railguns that obviously use a little bit of capacitor too. Mainly here on the Guardian, this is going to be pushing into our shield tanking modules, so the stronger our capacitor, the better, the longer we can keep those running without even thinking about it. Once we start hitting our other defences though, our signature radius is of course on the larger end of things. This is a heavy cruiser. The term heavy cruiser, you don't apply it to a ship that's small and nimble and, you know, flies under the enemy's radar. It's a big ship. 109.5 meter signature radius ensures that it is a big ship. It takes hits, and of course, with a certain module active, that's going to be even bigger, so we can kind of just ignore the signature radius and accept that we're going to be shot at. We then have a flight velocity that is on the slower end of cruisers at 243 meters per second. It's not terribly slow, like if you're flying battle cruisers and battleships more often, that's still a pretty decent flight speed, and faster than several destroyers out there, which is a problem, netties, but it's not a terrible speed at all, and it does allow you to get to and from where you need to be. Now, talking about speed and agility, we then have a mass of 11.72 million kilograms and an inertia modifier of 0.39. Combine those two together and you get, actually, not a terrible agility. It's not as agile as some of the other cruisers out there, but it's still very much better than most battle cruisers, and it's good enough for what we need. If we look then at the trait descriptions, first things first, this is a MOA ship. Now, being a Moa, medium railgun tracking speed is a roll bonus that just applies to those hulls, and that does insinuate that actually using things like snub-nosed railguns is going to be a pretty good idea here, because you're getting that additional 25% to the tracking speed, which obviously if you're sitting at range with rifled railguns, tracking speed doesn't come into it quite as much, whereas with snub-nosed, your tracking speed is very much an important facet of those guns. We've also got Advanced Cruiser Command giving us medium railgun damage plus 5% and a 7.5% reduction to the amount of capacitor that medium railguns require. Essentially, this means that the additional damage there, we're still not looking at much damage at all. It's not even the equivalent of having 4 high slots with that bonus of 25% damage, but it's nice to have, I guess? We're not worried about damage here. We are very much the tank of the party. We're not, here to kill things quickly. That's our DPS's job. The 7.5%, which obviously maxes out at 37.5% reduction to medium railgun capacitor need, however, that's there to stop your railguns chewing up the capacitor that your shield tanking modules require to run. So that's nice, that's really good, and again it pushes the idea that this is all about keeping that shield tank operative. Again, if we then look at Advanced Cruiser Defense upgrade, this gives us a 4% increase to shield resistance, 20% additional shield across the board before we've even activated any modules. 20% electromagnetic resistance on a shield is nothing to be sniffed at. I mean, heck, you normally start at that 0%, you're getting 20% across the board there, and then you're getting 20% of the gap in the other shield parts there filled too. Now you'll see that the resistances here on the Moa Guardian become absolutely monstrous once we've fitted it and started activating some skills. So let's actually jump in and fit this. Thanks to its roll bonuses and stat bonuses, the Moa Guardian is obviously heavily gearing towards being a tank in fleet engagements, whether that's fleet PvE or fleet PvP. In other MMOs, this is the warrior, the paladin, that kind of thing, the guy standing at the front of the party with a big shield and heavy armor, taking all the damage instead of everyone else, which means that the logistics, your healers, have an easier time of things. They've usually only got the one target that they need to try and keep alive and to focus on. Whereas, if you don't have a tank, then everyone's going to be taking damage and they're just that little bit more squishy. So it's easier to stay alive with a Moa Guardian around. Now, that's not to say that you can't fly a Moa Guardian solo, that it's only there for fleet PvE and fleet PvP. 100% you can solo pilot this thing. Just like, again, in other MMOs, you can take a tanking character out and do solo content as well. Sometimes really easily, thanks to how survivable you actually are. Now, your damage is going to be low, as we said. You're going to be aiming mainly towards survivability, but we would like that to have some capability of dealing damage. As such, I've lent into the Moa Guardian's roll bonus of the tracking speed to fit medium snub-nosed railguns. In this case, Magnate medium snub-nosed railguns. I'm keeping this entire fit to meta level 8 and lower. Now, this gives a tracking speed here of 94.38, which is pretty good for a medium turret. We're also getting some absolutely terrifying damage, 171 thermal, 280 kinetic, activating every 4.5 seconds. The only downside to the snub-nosed railguns is, of course, their pitiful range. 4.5 kilometers optimal, 6.48 kilometers accuracy. So your 100% effectiveness within optimal range, accuracy fall off is a distance beyond optimal that you drop to 50% effectiveness, so by time you're sitting at 11 kilometers, you're down to 50% effectiveness, and you're almost useless once you hit 16 to 17 kilometers. You do really need to be up close and personal. Oh, I've not said that in a while, that feels good to say. You need to be up close and personal to apply that damage as best as possible. That means, of course, we're going to be leaning into heavy tank, because you are going to be in range of every person's guns. Now, the first thing then, of course, is a shield field module, and yes, I have gone for a small shield field module for a reason here. We don't actually care about the bubble. In solo content, why do I care who is inside my bubble or not? Everyone's going to be inside my bubble because I'm going to be up close and personal. The reason I've gone for the small version is because it uses less fuel to activate. Now, with it active, our signature radius does increase by 500%, so we're sitting at over 500 meters signature radius, which is bigger than most battleships in the game, which is hilarious. But we do get the shield resistance boost of 56%, which is just insane, and you'll see the amount of resistance we can get out of this ship is terrifying. 56% shield resistance with that active. Everything's going to be hitting us, but we're going to be such a like heavily armored target, well, heavily shielded target, that none of that damage really is going to get through. Especially since we then have 2 Enterprise Adaptive Invulnerability fields, increasing those resistances by a further 34.58%. Now remember, when it comes to resistances, you're not just adding that 34.58 onto whatever it is already, you're filling in the gap. I have done a video on how tanking works and how those resistances work, but it's all about the gap. So you're taking 34.58% of the gap. If you're at 50% explosive resistance, for example, it's 34.58% of 50% that you're adding on there, which is still pretty good. It just means you're never going to quite hit 100%. Now, I've also gone for a large shield booster. Large shield booster fitted in here quite comfortably without the need for like a power grid rig or anything like that. And we're nice and comfortable with our power grid there to get a large shield booster. Which we can use obviously to heal up as time goes. You know, just you take a lot of damage over time, and then one cycle of that is enough to top you back up. So the idea is that we don't care that we're capacitor unstable with this. It's very low capacitor stability. We're only activating it literally once every goodness knows how long, just to cycle up a little bit. If we are worried about our capacitor, however, I have got a Demolish medium capacitor battery here, and interestingly enough, you can go for a medium shield booster, which makes you much more capacitor stable, and then fit a large capacitor battery in here as well for extra punch. Trouble is then you do struggle to fit in the micro warp drive, and I do personally recommend a micro warp drive here, not for orbiting and trying to speed tank, but just getting into range. The idea is to power up close into range of your snub-nosed railguns and then stay there. You turn your micro warp drive off once you're in range and you're orbiting nice and tightly around someone, hitting them with those railguns. It's just to get you from A to B as quickly as possible. And of course, we have a stasis web of fire here as well, designed just to hold that target and stop it escaping once we're in web range. Now, you can go for a scram here if you think that you're going to go up against a lot of micro warp drive targets, but I find the stasis web of fire does the job better. So, with this fit, we're currently looking at, okay, it's not much, 335.4 DPS, but our defense, cold, is already 32,471 EHP, 9,002 of which is on our shields, and before undocking, you can see that our lowest resistance here is electromagnetic and kinetic at 52%, with 65% on thermal and 60% on explosive. That's before we activate any of these modules. Our drone is a Mark 7 Valkyrie. This is just incidental damage on anything that happens to get close. I've gone for a Valkyrie because they are fast moving, good tracking speed, and they apply their damage really well to all targets. Now, if we're looking at our rigs here, I've gone heavily for the combat rigs, heavily into our tanking idea here. So an anti-EM screen reinforcer increases our shield damage resistance by 40%, and same with an anti-thermal screen reinforcer, making our thermal resistances nice and high too. Finally then, a core defense field extender of 30% additional shield is just giving us a nice big shield tank to work with. Ultimately, yes, these are Mark III rigs, but they tend to be fairly cheap compared to others and probably worth the extra money there to get the full 30%. Now, as far as the engineering rigs go, I've gone for 2 polycarbon engine housings, just the basic versions here, nice and cheap, just to make us, to help us hold onto that orbit, and a semiconductor memory cell, just to give myself a little bit of extra capacitor. But honestly, as you'll see in the combat demonstration, this third engineering rig can pretty much be anything you like. You could put extra cargo space in here for all it blasted well matters. This is very much an open slot. You can do what you want with it. So we're going to undock this and have an actual look at how this works in solo PvE. Here I am soloing Marketing Strategy Hard, which is a Tech 8 Gallente encounter. Now, I'm sitting here, I'm orbiting nice and close to my targets, I've got both of my adaptive invulnerability fields active with the shield field module, and you can see that is giving us some monstrous resists there, 106,000 defense there. Our lowest resistance is 90% on electromagnetic and on thermal, and kinetic, with thermal and explosive being even higher than that. Now we're getting on to the end of this first wave, and you'll see I'm now going up against a test drone Brutix. Very little damage taken at all during this first wave. I've barely had to activate the shield booster. As you can see there, when I do, I activate the battery just to make sure that I can keep the shield booster running as long as possible. I have the battery topped up, which pushes me way over 100% capacitor, which does help my capacitor recharge underneath it. It's, it's not really necessary. As you can see, I'm still sitting at like 97, 96% shield. plus our capacitor is still very, very healthy. Even when the capacitor battery drops off in a second, you'll see that we're still at 83%, 84% capacitor. We are quite comfortably dealing with all of this. And our damage, again, our damage isn't huge. It's not meant to be huge. We're a tanking class. We're all about the survivability. And the fact is, we're barely taking any damage at all. And it takes a tiny amount of capacitor just to heal up that damage, and then the capacitor recharges on its own afterwards anyway. We're not capacitor stable by any means, but as you can see, the capacitor battery really helps us here. We barely need to activate the shield booster, but even when we do activate it, it just doesn't do much. I've got to say, this angle on the Brutix as well actually reminds me of the Amar drones. Like, I know obviously it's not a drone, it's much, much bigger than a drone ever would be, but it's got that similar sort of profile to a Hobgoblin. And I like the fact that you can see here in the distance there's my Moa Guardian just languidly drifting past, not a care in the world, as it's dishing out its little bit of damage there against this test drone Brutix, which I am going to showcase this thing going down because I want to showcase the start of another wave, just because obviously with a ship like this I want to showcase what happens when you've got a lot of enemy ships firing at you, including small little annoying flies that you can't quite get a proper grip on with even the medium snub-nosed railguns. Even with those tracking speed bonuses, they are of course still going to be fairly difficult to actually hit those very small frigates and destroyers and things, but we're going to showcase that in effect now. This test drone Brutix should be going down in the next couple of hits. Nice big hit there from the railguns. Drone finishes it off. Kablooey, wave 2 spawns, and we've got a couple of test drone Algos C there to take out. Nice. Still looking for the day that those command destroyers actually get added to the game, or just the other destroyers get those same 5 high slots as the command destroyers. Nudge nudge, wink wink. Anyway, you can see here I've got the shield booster the capacitor battery active, which then allows me just to cycle the shield booster a few times, and oh, would you look at that, I'm still sitting at very high shields with nothing happening to me at all, because our resistances are just insane. You can see though, we are struggling to hit. We're just getting mainly grazes from the snub-nosed railguns. The drone is doing its work here against the Algos. This is why sometimes you may even want to just fit a small drone. On a ship like this, fitting a small drone is just there to do damage to, you know, small ships like this. But the medium ones, I think, are a nice balance of damage and application. They seem to do the job quite comfortably, and you'll see there goes that first test drone Algos, taking almost no damage at all. The capacitor battery is, you know, halfway through its recharge, and I've got no need at all to even consider activating the shield booster just yet. The shield field module is giving me nice resistances, the adaptive and vulnerability fields are doing their thing, the web of fire is holding onto this test drone as I approach and get into a little bit closer to optimal range, and hopefully start doing a bit more damage with that snub-nosed railgun. But again, it's all about the tanking here, and this thing will quite comfortably tank Tech 9 encounters and anomalies, and certainly I think some of the lower storyline ones you can actually look into. With this, you just need to be very, very careful. You can see quite comfortably taking very little damage at all. Moving on to the next ship just takes a bit of time to get through it, but it's a nice, safe, comfortable way of encounter running with no real risk going on. If your primary focus for the Moa Guardian is to use it as a tanking ship in fleet engagements, whether those are PvE or PvP, then of course we need to modify the fit accordingly, and this fit is loosely based upon both Void's doctrine and a couple of other different doctrines I've seen for things like Moa Guardians, Rupture Guardians, etc. It's just to give an idea based on those doctrines, but I have pushed things a little bit further. Does mean that normally a doctrine has that kind of balance between effectiveness and cost. This, I've kind of pushed it more into the effectiveness, thus increasing the cost. So it is kind of up to you if you decide that actually this is a bit too expensive and you're going to turn down some of the features on it. But it's designed there to get the maximum bang for your buck, and especially designed around the concept of you really investing in yourself as the tank. Now, first and foremost then, the difference between the PvE fit, the solo fit, and the fleet fit here is that we've swapped out the medium snub-nosed railguns for medium rifled railguns, and the primary reason for this, simply put, is range. If we're going to put up a shield field module, you need the enemy fleet to be outside of the shield field with all of your friends inside, and if you're going to go rushing up to the enemy to hit them with your snub-nosed railguns, they're going to be inside the bubble, thus rendering your bubble useless. On the other hand, if you're going to sit at range and keep the enemy fleet outside of your bubble, your snub-nosed railguns are going to be useless because they're out of range. If we swap to the rifled railguns, yeah, we take a DPS loss, but our point here is not to be applying damage, but to be absorbing it. The tank's damage is a secondary factor to consider. It is all about the survivability of you and your fleet. That's what comes first. Any damage that you manage to do in the meantime is purely secondary, which means some people do keep snub-nosed railguns just in case something does get inside the bubble, at which point the snub-nosed are higher damage and can hopefully take it out that little bit quicker. I personally prefer going for the rifled railguns. You may disagree, that's entirely up to you, and of course you can go either way. For the mid slots, you'll see that we've upgraded the first one here to a large shield field module. Now, saying I've upgraded is actually a lie because we still have the small shield field module here as well, and you may be thinking, whoa, hang on a second, why on earth do you have a small and a large? Well, the concept here is twofold. On one hand, by having a large shield field, you are going to spend more fuel, but encompass a larger area. Now, if the enemy fleet is beginning to encroach into the large bubble, you can swap down to the small shield field, use less fuel, and still encompass the fleet around you. Of course, there is the added advantage as well that if your fleet does move right in on you to a nice tight thing anyway, if you're sitting there with a bunch of snipers that are all literally 1 kilometer from you, then awesome. You can just go for the small shield field module and get pretty much the same effects out of it without guzzling as much fuel. It's just to give you the choice between big shield field and lots of fuel consumption, small shield field and less fuel consumption. Now, because survivability is our primary aspect here, in the low slots I've gone for a couple of changes. We have lost the battery. This is based on the concept that we should have a logistics vessel with us that hopefully has things like a capacitor transmitter, either a remote capacitor transmitter or group capacitor transmitter, that's going to help us out. So instead, we still have those two adaptive invulnerability fields, but now we've added a reactive shield hardener in here as well. Now, the main difference here, as you'll see, is that with the adaptive invulnerability fields, you get a better passive resistance overall, but there is both the module stacking penalty for having these. By having 2 of these, the second one is less effective than the first. If we went for a third one of these, it would be even less effective than the second, whereas swapping the third one to a reactive shield hardener, you don't take that hit. Secondly, reactive shield hardeners start off with a passive resistance, in this case of 17.29% across the board, but then they react to the damage that you're taking. This means that if you're getting shot at with lasers, for example, which deal purely electromagnetic damage, then the electromagnetic resistance here will increase. It will pump into the electromagnetic resistance at the cost of thermal, kinetic, and explosive, which you're not taking. This means that the reactive shield hardener will actually end up with a higher electromagnetic resistance than the adaptive invulnerability field would, but it will then have lower thermal, kinetic, and explosive. This means that you kind of need to know what you're going up against. If you're going up against a fleet of purely missiles, then a reactive shield hardener is not as good as an adaptive invulnerability field, but basically if you're going up against railguns, cannons, decomposers, or lasers, you will find the reactive shield hardener, especially as the third slot here, because of the stacking penalties, will work out better. Finally then, for the changes to the low slot, I've swapped out the medium shield booster for a large shield extender. Now, this is quite a big thing to cram into a ship here, and it does require some very high engineering skills and a few rigs, which we'll come to in a moment. The concept though is simple. If we've got this fitted, we're getting an additional 4,718 shield out of this, and we can then activate it for an additional 4,717 shield. That is a massive amount of additional survivability, which you can either use it in emergency just to activate it of, oh, I'm taking a bit more damage than I'd like, or heck, you can even just put it up at the beginning of a fight as soon as the first shot hits you to act as a buffer and take the stress off your logistics. Otherwise, even just leaving it there, the fact that it's giving you this big boost to your passive shields is already a really nice thing to have. I mean, heck, you'll look at those defenses. I'm going to showcase this active in just a moment. Before we do so though, as I said, we do have to rig into this, and you'll notice that all 3 of my engineering rigs are now ancillary power grid router 1s. Now, since I don't really care about being able to hold my position in an orbit or anything like that, I'm just here to park myself amongst the fleet and, keep myself and them alive. I can swap out all of those things like the polycarbonate engine housings for these instead. Now they're nice and cheap to go for 3 ancillary power grid router 1s rather than trying to fit ancillary power grid router 3s on there, which are a hell of a lot more expensive. That gives us enough power grid to fit in that extender, that large shield extender. Now, if I were to then activate everything here, so I'm going to put the large shield field module on there, and you'll get a nice big woof in a second of the bubble as it pops up there. There it goes. Let's put on the adaptive invulnerability fields. There we go. We will activate the reactive just to showcase how this works under the factor, you know, how the capacitor handles it. There you can see we've got all of those running. Obviously the reactive field hardener is not going to be doing anything at this point because we're not taking any damage to actually adapt to. But if I now go back into the defenses, you'll see we're sitting on an absolutely insane 180,799 effective hit points. 13,720 are just on the shields there of actual shield hit points, with resistances of 92% electromagnetic and kinetic, 94% on thermal, and 93 on explosive. The amount of damage we take is being reduced by anywhere between 92 and 94%, which is just insane. And again, that's on a shield that has 13,720 hit points. And then if you activate the shield extender, oh, would you look at that, we suddenly shoot all the way over there, and we're going to be getting even more shield hit points, which don't show up in the fitting menu for some reason. But you can see it just adds this massive amount of extra shielding there, which is just going to keep you alive for so long that your opponents are just going to basically give up and try and shoot at something else. Or at least, that's the hope. Now, I did promise a quick comparison to the Moa II Guardian just to give you an idea of what's going on there, so that's what we're going to do now. So we're going to jump into the Caldari ship tree, up to the Moa II Guardian, which is the tech level 8 variant of this ship. Does look a little bit different, almost looks like a healer. If you're sitting at a range and sort of just having a quick glance at this, that looks very similar to the Gurustus Pirates healer, which, yeah, it obviously uses the Moa frame, but has sort of a beige combat trim to it, whereas here it's just solid beige rather than the camo. Anyway, looking at the stats, first of all, the fitting profile. We can see that here we've still got 1 drone tube, we've got 3 high slots, 2 mids, but now we have 6 low slots, which is additional shielding there, additional shield modules, or we can put a weapon upgrade module or put the battery back on, all that kind of thing there. We've got a bigger power grid. The power grid has gone from 658 up to 707 megawatts, which is a 7.5% overall increase. That's awesome. That means, you know, that 6th low slot, we've got a bit more power grid that can actually take that 6th low slot, but it also obviously exponentially stacks with our cruiser engineering skills and any rigs that we happen to have. Other than that, things are pretty much the same there in the fitting profile. The capacitors, though, they've increased by 15% to 2,824. Our defenses have had a 10% increase to 15,491. Our signature radius has been reduced by 5%. Our flight velocity has gone up by 16%, and our scan resolution has gone up by an absolutely incredible 1%, like literally 231 to 233. It's almost a what's the point there, but hey, it's nice to have. The mass and the inertia, interestingly enough, we have the exact same mass of 11.72 million kilograms, but the inertia modifier has changed from 0.39 times to 0.41 times. That's a difference between an agility value previously of 4,570,800 to now a 4,805,200, which is a 5% increase in agility. So you're going to turn 5% faster, accelerate and decelerate 5% faster. That's, again, a nice thing to have. When it comes to the trait descriptions as well, you'll see that our ability here for the medium railgun tracking speed has increased from 25% to 37.5%, giving us a 12.5% increase in our medium railgun tracking speed. That's always going to be nice for solo use, as I'd explained earlier with the medium snub-nosed railguns, but it does help the rifled as well to hit moving targets, which is always going to be a nice thing to have. The shield resistance is still 4%, the medium railgun capacity need is still a 7.5% reduction, but we are now getting a 7.5% increase to medium railgun damage. This has gone from 25% to 37.5%. Again, that is a 12.5% increase, which means now, yes, we are acting as if we have 4 high slots, just over 4 high slots, rather than just the 3. This means that the Moa II Guardian, yes, is a direct upgrade to the Moa Guardian. The Moa Guardian and the Moa II Guardian, they are the exact same ship, but the Moa II Guardian gets a lot of improvements across the board. There is nothing about the Moa II Guardian that is worse than the Tech 7 Moa Guardian, other than, in my personal opinion, the colour scheme. I do prefer the paint job on the Moa Guardian to the Moa II Guardian. Obviously, the Moa Guardian is going to be cheaper than the Moa II Guardian as well, but if you can afford the Moa II Guardian, well, it's just a better ship. And basically, all you're going to do here is add an additional low slot tanking module, or a weapon upgrade like a magnetic field stabilizer, or a capacitor battery or something like that. You can even put a damage control unit in there for all it matters if tanking is something you want to do and just go absolutely insane. Kind of pointless, because as you've seen, we're already sitting at 92 to 94% resistances. All you're going to push that up to is maybe 95, 96%, which doesn't make that huge amount of difference. I'd kind of look more at the survivability, sustainability would be a better word for it, of fitting something like a capacitor battery into that low slot, maybe even a weapon upgrade, especially for solo use. Putting a weapon upgrade in there seems like the better option here, just to kick out that little bit of extra damage. Even in a fleet engagement, it means you get to just, you know, help out and deal a bit more damage to your opponents, which is never a bad thing. You know, if you watch tanks in other MMOs, you know, they'll occasionally activate some of their DPS abilities just to hit and help out, killing something that little bit faster. Always a nice thing to do. But yeah, otherwise, direct upgrade. And there we have it, everything I think you need to know about the Moa Guardian, and a brief look at the Moa II Guardian in comparison. This is an incredibly tanky shield ship. This thing it has shields for days, its survivability is utterly insane, and if you're running a fleet with one of these bad boys in the center of it, well, your opponent is in for a real tough time trying to crack through that shell. I really enjoy this ship. I'm not much of a tank player in EVE, but I do enjoy the Moa. I think there's just something about the way it looks. I like how ridiculously powerful those shields are. It's an interesting thing for me to dabble in from time to time, and if you're a tank, I'd love to hear some cool stories from you about the kind of crazy things you've done in your Moa Guardian, or your Moa II Guardian. It's those three ships specifically I'd love to hear some cool stories about. That said though, let's talk about this week's Combo Omega giveaway. Like every week, I have 2 individual months of Combo Omega to give away to 2 lucky winners. This week, what I want you to do in the comment section down below, in order to be in for a chance of winning, is tell me about the best thing you've ever seen happen in a fleet. That could be a mining fleet, that could be a combat PvE fleet, it could be you blowing up one of GenFed's stations, it could be all kinds of different things like that. I just want to know what kind of fun you have seen in a fleet. You don't even have to have been part of that fleet. It could have been something that you saw on YouTube, or you witnessed on Reddit, or all these kind of things. Just let me know the coolest thing you ever saw happen in a fleet in EVE Echoes. Otherwise, folks, thank you for watching this one right the way to the end. Let me know your thoughts and opinions on the Moa and the Moa II Guardian. I'd be really interested to hear all that. Otherwise, thanks for watching, happy sailing, and see you in New Eden!